Have you ever stopped to think what would happen if the Earth stopped rotating? It seems impossible, doesn't it? But what if I told you that this could trigger the biggest disaster in human history? Imagine the ground shaking beneath your feet, the sky suddenly darkening as a dead silence fills the air. Then, without warning, a deafening sound of violent winds begins to echo around them. You feel the pressure in your chest increasing as the air is sucked from your lungs. The buildings around you begin to collapse like dominoes as colossal waves emerge from the horizon, rushing towards you. The world is falling apart before your eyes, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. Sounds like science fiction. Well, science says that this apocalyptic scenario may not be as unlikely as it seems. If the Earth truly stopped spinning, winds of more than 5,000 km/h would sweep across the planet within seconds, while the magnetic field would collapse, leaving all life exposed to lethal cosmic radiation. Giant tsunamis would swallow entire cities, and the natural cycle of days and nights would disappear, creating an inferno of extreme heat and cold. But what would happen next? Could life on Earth adapt? Would there be any chance of survival for humanity, or would we be doomed to extinction? Today, you will discover the darkest secrets of this devastating scenario. Science has some answers, but some theories indicate that the worst is yet to come. Do you believe this can really happen? Some scientists believe so, and if they're right, the end may be closer than we think. Leave your thoughts in the comments and keep watching, because there's evidence to suggest this may already be in the works. And what you discover could change everything we know about Earth's future. The moment the Earth stopped, the atmosphere would continue moving for more than 1,670 km/h on the equator. This would generate a devastating wall of wind, capable of uprooting trees, destroying buildings, and throwing cars miles away. The debris would create a storm of metal and concrete, turning the air into a sharp, deadly mass. In less than a minute, entire cities would be decimated, while the ground would literally be ripped from beneath the survivors' feet. The oceans, due to inertia, would form mega tsunamis of more than 1 kilometer high that would advance at breakneck speeds. Imagine a wall of water as tall as a skyscraper bearing down on the continent, destroying everything in its path. Coastal cities would disappear within minutes, swept away by the overwhelming force of the water. Rivers would overflow instantly, and even mountainous regions would suffer from the impact of the waves. After the initial impact, the water would flood entire areas, leaving the ground completely devastated and contaminated with marine sediments. The centrifugal force that once kept the oceans and atmosphere in balance would disappear. Without it, ocean water would begin to migrate towards the poles, creating regions of extreme drought at the equator and accumulating huge masses of ice in the polar regions. Areas that were once tropical forests would become arid deserts, while the poles would expand, covering parts of the continents with thick sheets of ice. The redistribution of mass over the Earth's crust would increase tectonic pressure, causing earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on a global scale. At the same time, the air would collapse. The atmosphere would begin to redistribute unevenly, creating unstable pressure zones. Cyclonic winds would form in previously stable areas, and electrical storms would sweep across the planet relentlessly. The heat accumulated on the illuminated side of the planet would trigger firestorms, while the opposite side, plunged into darkness, would face cold so intense that the oceans would freeze in a matter of hours. This extreme temperature difference would create an insurmountable atmospheric barrier, isolating the planet in zones of permanent heat and cold. For humans, the effects would be instantaneous. The collapse of transport and energy infrastructure would leave cities in complete chaos. Communication networks would be destroyed, and survivors would struggle to find shelter and basic resources. Food and water supply systems would collapse, and panic would spread quickly. Conflicts over resources would be inevitable, as governments would try to contain the chaos without success. But most worryingly, some evidence suggests that Earth's rotation is already slowly slowing down. Studies indicate that the Earth's day is increasing by microseconds every century. And if this process continues, rotation could stop completely in the distant future. If this actually happens, the scenario you just imagined could go from being a hypothesis to becoming a reality. Do you realize how everything we know about the planet depends on something as fragile as its rotational movement? The idea that the world can simply stop, letting chaos take over, seems absurd. But the signs are there. And the scariest thing is that science may not yet have the answers to stop this. The fact that you are here, trying to understand what would happen if the Earth stopped rotating, already shows that you are part of a minority that really questions the functioning of the universe. Not everyone has the courage to explore these scenarios, but you do. And that's why your like is important. When you leave a like, YouTube understands that this type of content has value and deserves to be shown to more people who, like you, want to understand the darkest secrets of the universe. It's as if you are strengthening this community of curious minds, helping more people awaken to the unknown. So, if you believe that these issues need to be explored and that more people should have access to this type of knowledge, click like now. But this is just the beginning. Because if you think the initial impact is scary enough, wait until you find out what would happen to Earth's magnetic field and how cosmic radiation could turn the planet into a veritable hell. Keep watching, because what you discover next could forever change the way you see our world. Without rotation, the natural cycle of days and nights would completely disappear. The side facing the sun would be subjected to constant exposure to sunlight, raising temperatures to more than 200 degrees Celsius in a few hours. The extreme heat would cause rivers and lakes to evaporate quickly, while the ground would crack under the pressure of the heat. Cities would become true furnaces, with asphalt melting and metal structures deforming. Vegetation would collapse almost immediately, eliminating any possibility of agriculture and starting a domino effect on the food chain. While the illuminated side would face unbearable heat, the opposite side would be plunged into deadly cold, with temperatures dropping below 100 degrees Celsius. Oceans, lakes, and rivers would quickly freeze, forming thick layers of ice that would cover the ground within hours. The absence of solar heat would cause the air to become thin and extremely dry, making breathing difficult and eliminating any possibility of animal life on the surface. This brutal thermal difference between the hemispheres would create a completely unstable climate system. The warm, rarefied air on the light side would collide with the cold air on the dark side, generating unpredictable atmospheric currents. Hurricanes and tornadoes of colossal proportions would emerge in regions that had never experienced this type of weather event. The moisture-laden clouds would be forced to release acidic precipitation, saturated with toxic compounds released by the destruction of the ozone layer. These rains would corrode metals, burn skin, and render the soil infertile in a matter of days. Electrical storms would also become a common phenomenon. The temperature difference and the instability of air currents would create ideal conditions for large-scale electrical discharges. Lightning would continuously cut across the sky, while deafening thunder would echo for miles. These storms would destroy electrical grids and any technological systems still in operation, completely isolating the affected regions. Without the natural cycle of days and nights, the biological rhythms of living things would collapse. Diurnal animals would be forced to adapt to constant light, while nocturnal species would suffer from the absence of darkness. On the frozen side of the planet, animal life would be practically non-existent, with only a few extremophile life forms capable of withstanding the extreme conditions. This new climate balance would lead to the complete destruction of ecosystems in a matter of weeks. Food chains would be disrupted, and animal populations that depend on plants and small organisms would quickly become extinct. Without vegetation to recycle oxygen, carbon dioxide levels would rise, making the air even more unbreathable. The planet, once home to an impressive diversity of life, would turn into a barren desert, divided between a furnace and perpetual winter. And now comes the question that no one wants to face. Even if some survivors manage to adapt temporarily, how much time would humanity really have left? The real danger isn't just social collapse. It's coming from outside, directly from space. And what you discover next may prove that we are completely defenseless in the face of this invisible threat. The rapid destruction of ecosystems and the end of food production would create a global famine scenario in a matter of weeks. Without access to renewable food sources, food reserves would become the most contested resource on the planet. Food stocks would be short-lived, and rationing would become inevitable. Entire families would be forced to abandon their homes in search of food, increasing migratory flows and generating tensions in survival zones. The few organized groups that controlled food stocks would have absolute power over the population, creating a new system of domination based on the possession of basic resources. Armed conflicts would become inevitable. Paramilitary groups and organized militias would control access to food and water, establishing a regime of violence and domination. Survival would not only depend on the ability to adapt to the new environment, but also on the ability to negotiate or take by force available resources. Scarcity of food and water would transform human behavior, leading to the complete collapse of the social structure. If you think social collapse is already extreme, imagine a world where the air itself begins to disappear and cosmic radiation turns the surface into a field of silent destruction. What happens when the invisible shield that protects the planet simply ceases to exist? The Earth's rotation is what keeps the magnetic field active, functioning as an invisible shield that protects us from cosmic radiation and solar storms. If the Earth stopped rotating, the internal metallic core, responsible for generating this field, would also cease its movement, leading to the gradual destruction of this protective barrier. Without the magnetic field, high-energy charged particles from the solar wind would directly hit the planet's surface. Solar radiation would ionize the atmosphere, fragmenting oxygen and nitrogen molecules and creating a chain reaction that would accelerate the dissipation of air into space. Direct exposure to cosmic radiation would cause large-scale cellular mutations. The rate of cancer and degenerative diseases would increase rapidly, while living organisms would suffer genetic mutations that could make reproduction and the continuity of species unviable. Human skin would suffer constant burns, even in the presence of protective clothing, as radiation would penetrate the surface layer of the skin, destroying DNA. Radiation would also directly affect the nervous and immune systems, compromising the body's ability to respond to diseases and infections. The ozone layer, which acts as a secondary barrier against ultraviolet rays, would be destroyed quickly. Without it, surface UV radiation levels would increase to the point where direct sunlight would be impossible to survive. Regions that were previously habitable would become lethal zones in a matter of hours, with high temperatures and an atmosphere saturated with ionized particles. On the dark side of the planet, the absence of protection against cosmic rays would create a kind of radiation rain, penetrating directly into the ground and contaminating any underground water source. The gradual dissipation of the atmosphere would further worsen the scenario. Without adequate atmospheric pressure, liquid water would begin to evaporate directly into space. The oceans would progressively lose volume, while lakes and rivers would disappear completely. The combination of intense radiation, thin air, and extreme temperatures would make the environment inhospitable to even the most resilient life forms. If the magnetic field really disappeared, do you think humanity would be able to survive? Could science find a way to recreate this protection, or would we be doomed to be slowly destroyed by cosmic radiation? What's more, do you believe that this process could already be happening without us noticing? Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know what you think about this apocalyptic scenario. Faced with an apocalyptic scenario, survival would depend on extreme technological solutions. One of the most viable strategies would be to build underground cities, not just to escape the extreme temperatures, but to create a controlled environment where life could continue. These cities would require advanced life support systems, including air purifiers, geothermal energy generation, and hydroponic growing systems to produce food in confined spaces. Protection against cosmic radiation would require the use of highly dense materials, such as lead and reinforced steel, to coat walls and prevent charged particles from penetrating. Terraforming the surface would be another possibility, albeit an extremely challenging one. Scientists could try to manipulate the composition of the atmosphere to recreate a thermal balance, using carbon capture systems to reduce the concentration of toxic gases. Giant orbital mirrors could be installed to redirect sunlight, balancing the temperature between the light and dark sides of the planet. However, the energy challenge to keep these systems running would be immense, requiring a virtually unlimited energy source. The creation of an artificial magnetic field could be one of the most viable solutions to tackle the problem of cosmic radiation. Satellites equipped with electromagnetic generators could be positioned in orbit, creating a magnetic shield located over habitable regions. Another possibility would be to use giant electromagnetic coils installed directly on the surface, generating an artificial magnetic field to deflect charged particles. However, maintaining this system would require colossal levels of energy, which would make this solution viable only in strategic areas. Resource limitations would be the biggest obstacle to implementing these solutions. Building underground cities and generating magnetic fields would require advanced technology, rare metals, and sophisticated logistics infrastructure. As a result, only a fraction of the population could have access to these protection systems. Safe zones would become highly controlled territories, where access would be restricted to specific groups with political or economic power. This would create a new social dynamic based not only on military strength, but also on the ability to control access to technology and resources essential for survival. The inequality between those who would have access to protection and those who would be left to fend for themselves would generate a scenario of constant tension and conflict. Survivors outside the safe zones would be forced to live in a hostile environment, without protection from radiation and without access to food and clean water. This would create a permanent division between safe zones and devastated regions, consolidating a power structure based on technology and access to resources. But would these strategies really guarantee humanity's long-term survival? Or would they just be a way of postponing the inevitable? Keep watching, because what you discover next could completely change how we think about the future of civilization. Scientists know that the Earth's rotation is already slowing down naturally, a few milliseconds per century, due to gravitational interaction with the Moon and the movement of the tides. But a complete shutdown would be an unprecedented event in the planet's geological history. Simulation models show that the domino effect would directly affect the stability of the Earth's crust and geological activity. The Earth's core, composed of iron and nickel in liquid state, is responsible for generating the Earth's magnetic field through its rotational movement. If this movement were to cease, the core would begin to solidify from the inside out, directly compromising the planet's internal thermal balance. This cooling would lead to the collapse of tectonic activity, reducing the Earth's ability to release internal heat through volcanoes and plate movement. This would cause cracks to appear in the Earth's crust, releasing large amounts of magma and toxic gases into the atmosphere. The collapse of tectonic plate movement would result in explosive volcanic activity. Volcanoes that have remained dormant for thousands of years could erupt simultaneously, covering vast areas with ash and poisonous gases. The release of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere would create a layer of particles that would partially block sunlight, further aggravating the thermal imbalance between the hemispheres. The absence of tectonic activity would also affect the formation of new mountain ranges and the pressure balance between continents. Geologically stable regions could sink due to mass displacement, while seismic fault zones would become unstable, resulting in devastating earthquakes in previously safe regions. The moon's gravitational impact would also be altered. The gravitational interaction that regulates the movement of tides and the positioning of the Earth in relation to the solar axis would be compromised, affecting the duration of the seasons and the planetary orbital cycle. The absence of an internal gravitational balance could ultimately lead to changes in the tilt of the Earth's axis, resulting in more extreme and unpredictable seasons. Scientists believe these effects would be irreversible. Without the internal heat generated by the movement of the core, Earth would become a geologically dead planet, similar to Mars. The loss of geological activity would mean that the surface would not be able to regenerate, and the effects of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes would leave permanent scars on the planetary relief. If you've made it this far, it's because this apocalyptic scenario really made you think, right? Now tell me, have you left your like yet? Seriously, your like shows YouTube that this type of content deserves to be delivered to more people who, like you, are searching for answers to the universe's darkest mysteries. So, if you're enjoying this in-depth analysis, hit the like button now and strengthen this community of curious minds. But what if the scientists are wrong? What if there are forces that we do not yet understand, capable of triggering an effect much more devastating than any simulation model predicts? The collapse of social structures and the hostile environment would create a devastating psychological impact on survivors. The constant feeling of threat and the fight for basic resources would cause human behavior to be shaped by a relentless survival instinct. Trust between individuals would disappear, leading to the fragmentation of communities and emotional isolation. The fear of betrayal and the instinct of self-preservation would cause even family relationships to be broken in the face of the need for survival. The absence of a regular cycle of days and nights would profoundly affect psychological balance. Sleep deprivation, combined with physical and emotional stress, would lead to psychotic breaks, hallucinations, and paranoia. Many survivors would completely lose track of time and space, creating a distorted perception of reality. The constant feeling that the world is on the verge of the end would generate extreme behavior, with some people adopting violent stances and others simply giving up the fight. The search for answers to the collapse would lead to the emergence of new forms of belief and explanation for what happened. Without a political or scientific framework to offer concrete answers, charismatic leaders would emerge, creating simplified narratives about the origin of the destruction. Cults based on apocalyptic theories and mystical interpretations of reality would spread rapidly, filling the void left by the absence of governments and systems of social control. The need to find meaning in the collapse would make these beliefs powerful, shaping collective behavior and creating new social dynamics based on faith and submission. Children growing up in this new world would be profoundly shaped by this reality of scarcity and hostility. They would not know the concept of security, stability, or social trust. Cooperation would give way to individual survival, and the sense of community would be replaced by temporary alliances based on interests. Violence and emotional isolation would be seen as natural behaviors, creating a generation marked by trauma and antisocial behavior. The long-term psychological impact would also manifest itself in a complete collapse of social values. Survivors would face a crisis of collective identity where notions of morality and justice would be replaced by rules based on strength and control. The idea of a prosperous and stable future would disappear, being replaced by a constant struggle to secure the next day. Now that you know what could happen if the Earth stopped spinning, you are part of a select group who truly understand the gravity of this scenario. So, share this video now with that friend who loves mysteries of the universe, because this is the type of knowledge that few people have access to. Let's make this conversation go further. But are we prepared to make the right decisions before the worst happens? The extreme scenarios that could arise if the Earth stopped rotating reveal how fragile our planet's balance really is. Science already understands that the Earth's internal functioning and climate stability depend on delicate and interconnected mechanisms. The slightest change in any of these processes could trigger an irreversible domino effect. And this shows us that the planet is far from being as stable as we imagine. This extreme situation teaches us that humanity needs to rethink its relationship with the planet. The continuity of life on Earth cannot depend solely on technological advances. A coordinated effort is needed to understand and protect the natural systems that keep the planet in balance. Scientists are already warning that constant monitoring of tectonic activity, variations in the magnetic field, and climate change must be a global priority so that any sign of instability is detected in time to avoid a large-scale collapse. The creation of planetary protection systems is no longer a matter of science fiction. It is a strategic necessity to guarantee the survival of humanity. But the real challenge lies in how these solutions would be implemented. Would they be accessible to everyone or restricted to a small group? Could the concentration of power over these technologies create a new dynamic of global domination? The survival of humanity may depend not only on technological advances, but also on political and social decisions that define how these tools will be used. This hypothetical situation forces us to reflect on humanity's role in preserving the planet. The Earth is a complex system, and science has proven that small changes can have devastating effects. If we want to secure the future of civilization, we need to act now, investing in research, international cooperation, and policies that promote planetary resilience. The question remains: are we ready to make these decisions before it is too late? Now I want to hear from you. What crazy hypothesis about the universe has crossed your mind? Do you believe there are other parallel universes? Could black holes be portals to other dimensions? Or is time, as we know it, just an illusion? Leave your theory in the comments, because the best ideas could end up being the next video. I want to see how far your mind can go. If you've made it this far, you already know that what we've explored today is just the beginning. The universe is full of unanswered questions, and here, each question leads to a new mystery. So, click now, sign up, and be part of this community of explorers of the unknown. Being part of this is embarking on a journey through theories and discoveries that challenge everything we know about the cosmos. What you just saw is just the beginning. What if the answer to this mystery lies in something we can't yet see, something hidden, waiting to be discovered? In the next video, you'll delve even deeper into the secrets of the universe, and maybe find a piece that changes everything we believe about reality.